What's up everybody, welcome back to my channel Mystery Money. I thought I'd do something a little different this week and highlight some of the news articles that I found interesting with topics that surround money and business. The first article was posted in MarketWatch on August 25th, and it's an opinion piece that states that the Federal Reserve has a tough choice either to curb inflation or appease the Biden administration. In this article it states that the economic recovery is not playing out exactly how the Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell had anticipated. This partly has to do with that COVID accelerated trends that altered the supply and demand, which would have happened gradually over time had businesses not closed. And in the piece it states that how many workers that were displaced by the pandemic and potentially working from home that they don't want to return to their office, and this kind of puts a dilemma on public transportation as well as sandwich shops, coffee shops, and all of those businesses that support those workers in downtown areas. At the same time, they're having to deal with the shortage of workers and the inability to fully staff restaurants. All of these situations, as well as the bottlenecks of production, which is hampering supply, is also causing these prices to increase. Well, the Federal Reserve believes that this is a short-term situation and that when schools get back in and companies start to reopen completely, and as the economy begins to move more, that those prices should recede. But at the same time, the job of the Federal Reserve is to curb inflation. All of that $6 trillion in stimulus and relief money that was spread around by the federal government is still sitting in household, corporate, and state government checking accounts. At the household level, with extra money sitting around, as businesses open up, there's going to be more demand and less supply, and this again will increase prices. The way that the Federal Reserve can taper inflation is to increase interest rate. Although the increase in interest rates is based towards bond buying in the sector of the economy and directly impacts banks, those increases in interest rates will be passed on to consumers. The logic is if you make borrowing money more expensive by increasing interest rates, people will borrow less, which will drive demand down, more equal with supply, and eventually the prices will level off. The problem with increasing interest rates is that things like mortgages are directly impacted when people have to pay more to borrow money. Suddenly a house that was affordable, cost $100,000 with a manageable interest rate of 3% may become out of reach when the interest rate goes to 6%. At the same time, we have been in a period of historically low interest rates. I remember my first mortgage on my house back in 2006 was at 6.25%. So even increasing a slight amount, I don't believe is going to dissuade people from moving. If you have a better chance of getting a job in a different area that's going to pay you 30% more than you're making now, but your interest rate is going to be higher, you're still going to be making out in the long run. Basically, the Federal Reserve is in a tough spot right now because if they let inflation run too hot, prices drastically increase, which decreases the buying power of the consumers. But if they curb inflation and increase interest rates too soon or too high, then spending is going to drop, particularly in sections such as housing. Increased interest rates will also hit small businesses such as revolving lines of credit that are based on fluctuating interest rates, usually tied to the prime interest rate. Also indirectly, it's going to affect business credit cards because those rates are also often tied to prime. If businesses' costs increase, then they're going to have to pass those on to their customers. And this cycle continues and pushes prices higher. I'm going to link the article below so you can read it for yourself, but I thought it was very interesting on how it applies to businesses. The second article that I'm going to talk about comes from News Press Now, and it's titled "Supply Setbacks Impact Small Businesses." This is a similar complaint that I hear from many of the small businesses that I work with. Their inventories are low because they can't get shipments. These can come from China or other countries that produce, and there aren't comparable products that they can purchase in the US. If there are products that are made here, the prices are not at the same level that they can remain profitable. Years ago, we went to a just-in-time inventory system. It's very efficient and it reduces waste, but it's also dependent on the smooth flow of goods. This system has worked for a very long time and it's only had minor hiccups, usually due to inclement weather or things like that impact it for a few days. And usually after a day or two, the inventory is back up to normal or the shipments can remake it to the stores. What we had in the beginning of 2020 was the fact that manufacturing had shut down, so whatever was on the shelves at the time was all that was coming. We saw this with the rise of toilet paper sales as well as food. There were many articles that came out saying empty grocery store shelves and other necessities were not available. Statistically, a grocery store only has about 3 days of food on the shelves at any given time. So when you pair that with the rising demand of panic buying and overall uncertainty with the world, that is why you get empty shelves. The issue now is most of these stores are trying to restock their shelves to a point where they were before the pandemic shut them down. But the manufacturers have not gotten back to a level of production that they were pre-pandemic. So until we get back to a level of production that we were prior to the pandemic, supply levels return to where they were, and the panic buying stops, you may still see sometimes when you have empty shelves. One of the largest issues they have is a labor shortage. Look at the amount of companies that are offering incentives, bonuses, or even daily pay in order to incentivize workers to come back. Think of the economy as a very well-oiled machine. All it takes is a small piece of dirt that can throw off the whole mechanism. And that's exactly what we had. Over the last 18 months, we've had periods of stability when manufacturing can get back, and then every now and then you'll have a flare-up in an area, or there'll be a tropical storm or hurricane that can cause increased strain on the supply chain. At the end of the day, it's probably going to be another 6 months to a year until we get back to the levels of production that we were pre-pandemic. And that's given there's no additional jolts to the system that cause issues. Many businesses are taking this time to use extra cash to shore up their inventory levels to make sure that if there's another slowdown, that they have adequate inventory to carry them through. The downside of this is by increasing the demand and not allowing for enough supply, the prices will also increase. If businesses aren't careful, like with the lumber industry, they could be sitting on a whole stack of 2x4s that cost them $8 a piece, but now they're only selling for $4 a piece. It's a juggling act of any small business to make sure you're making the best possible decision when it comes to keeping inventory. I'll link that article below too, so you can check that one out also. And the last article I want to cover is from NPR titled, "More Retail Workers Are Quitting Than Ever, but More Stores Are Opening Than Expected." In June, 632,000 workers quit their retail jobs. For most of the year, every month, 4% of retail workers have quit. If you've ever gone to a fast food restaurant in the past 6 months, you realize that they are all understaffed and that the lines are incredibly long. And it feels like the people that are working there are getting younger and younger. I made another video where I talk about how society values these workers. I used to be in the camp that thought $15 an hour is way too much money for what you do at a fast food restaurant and prices would have to increase. But since the pandemic, I've changed my mind and realized that they do provide a valuable service that society undervalues. This is evident to me that every fast food line is packed all the time. This tells me that people would rather eat out at restaurants regardless of cost. Even the prices of most of your menu items have increased, but people still frequent those restaurants. In all likelihood, it's basically for convenience. And let's face it, the food is not exactly great for you, but with convenience, you also pay a higher price. As far as the workers quitting, I think this has crossed all job categories and companies. I'm not so much talking about the small mom and pop businesses that truly do try and take care of their employees. I'm talking more along the line of the giant corporation. This trend can be seen across any type of industry, from fast food all the way up to white-collar six-figure earners. Anyone that continued to work through the pandemic is facing some sort of burnout. And I know what you're thinking, oh, boo-hoo, the white-collar worker getting paid 6 figures to sit in an office. But at some point, you begin to think to yourself, is there more to the world than just working? Are companies getting to the point where they're treating you so poorly that you're willing to walk away from a high salary just to be heard or valued? Corporate America is dealing with the crisis right now, as people are finding they would rather be making a little less money but working from home, or working from anywhere they choose. The idea of going back to crowding into an office or large complex is overwhelming. While I agree that not everyone wants to work from home or not work from an office setting, companies are going to have to come to terms that some of their employees are going to want something different, and that there's going to be a major difference of opinions when it comes to how people want to work. If you're a corporation and 50% of your workforce wants to work from home, see if you can accommodate that. There are so many tasks and jobs that can be done remotely without the need of a physical presence, and think how much money they would save on not having these corporate leases and large office buildings in major metropolitan areas. Are you requiring workers to come back to the office simply because you have managers or middle management that needs to physically see a person in order to think that they're working? These are just some of my opinions why I think the future of work is going to look completely different than it does even today. At the end of the day, employees want one simple thing: to be valued and to be paid fairly for their contribution to the company. Pretty simple, and it's not that complex of an equation. Treat people as though they are valued and pay them fairly. Hope you got some value out of these articles. Please do click on them and read them, make your own opinions. Thanks for taking the time to watch another video, and until next time, have a great day.